All right, let's get into it. Welcome back to the Business Exit and Acquisition Playbook. I'm Trent Lee, the top business broker in the country, and today we're pulling back the curtain on one of the most common ways that buyers overpay for businesses. That's inventory. The goal here is not to get sucked into paying twice or overpaying for a business when you look at buying it. Here's the deal. By the end of the episode, you'll know exactly how inventory should be handled, why paying for a multiple of earnings plus inventory is usually a bad deal for you as the buyer, and how to protect yourself so that you don't pay for the same thing twice. So, first question we need to ask, why does inventory confuse so many buyers? Why is this even an issue? Because on the surface, it sounds simple. You're buying a business, it has inventory. So, of course, you pay for it. But here's the catch. When you value a business using a multiple of earnings, let's say 3 times DE, 4 times EBITDA, those earnings already assume that the buyer has the right amount of inventory on the shelves. So if the seller turns around and says, oh, by the way, you need to pay me for the inventory. That's like buying a used car and then being told that you need to pay extra because they're going to include the tires. It's already baked into the price. The assumption is the car holds the value that they're asking that you're buying it because it already has tires. Same thing goes with the inventory. It's included in the purchase price most of the time. Now, that doesn't mean other brokers out there that don't know what they're doing might try and pull one over on you, a fast one, and get you to pay a multiple of earnings plus inventory. So let me give you an example. Say you buy a small retail business. Let's say it earns $300,000 in SDE. The broker lists it for 3 times earnings, $900,000. Then later on in the fine print or later on in the sim, it says plus $200,000 of inventory. If you don't catch it, you end up paying $1.1 million. That's not a 3 times multiple anymore. It's closer to 3.7 or that thereabouts, if my math is right. So you just got tricked into paying a premium and you didn't even really know about it. It's bad advertising and a bad valuation. So, question you need to ask yourself, if I'm paying a fair multiple of earnings, or am I paying a premium for hidden inventory in the business? You need to ask yourself that. Now, is inventory always included? Unfortunately, not always. Sometimes it's added as a separate cost, and that's common in wholesale businesses, some retail businesses, some product heavy businesses. Here's the key. If you're paying a full market multiple of earnings, then the inventory should be included. If it's not, you need to either negotiate one of two things, a lower multiple and then add the inventory at cost, or you need to keep the full multiple and make sure the inventory is included in the sale. Don't accept both. That's double charging. So again, just to recap, you want to make sure that you either pay a fair market multiple and the inventory is included, or said the opposite way, you pay a lower market multiple and add the inventory on top of that. Now, let me give you maybe one real life example here. I had a toy shop for sale a little while ago, and unfortunately, it just didn't make that much money. So when we took a multiple of earnings, a fair market multiple, it wasn't nearly enough to even cover the inventory value. So I had to have a frank conversation with the seller. We either sell the business off for inventory value, or we sell it at a lower, what's called a going concern value, and it includes the inventory, which really doesn't make sense because the valuation from a multiple of earnings was less than just the pure liquidation value. And he just wouldn't have it. And so I'm telling you this because he literally spent years fighting me on this. He said, no way, I'm not going to list it. Called me back another year. Business was no better, really no worse, and just couldn't come to terms with it that he had that much inventory and the business just wasn't that profitable. Finally, I got to the point, literally after 3 years, where I told him in a nice, polite way that honestly, your business is worth more dead than it is alive. In other words, it's better just to liquidate the whole business and sell off the inventory because he's going to get more for liquidation value of the inventory than he is going to get if he sold it for a multiple of earnings and included the inventory. Did he like that? No, unfortunately not. And so to this day, he's still strapped behind the counter, can't sell it because he can't come to terms. And last I heard, the business was declining. So he's really in a bad position. Now, that's only to bring up why do you care about that as a buyer? You really don't, other than to say there are some businesses that are so inventory heavy, they're just not good deals as a buyer. So watch out for those and don't be afraid to walk away from those. So, what do banks expect when it comes to inventory? SBA lenders expect the inventory to be included in the deal. They know the earnings multiple already assumes the working inventory is in place. It's like working capital, which we'll cover later on in this course, but the inventory is part of that working capital. There needs to be normal levels of working capital or normal levels of inventory that are included. And if a seller's trying to charge you separately, banks will either lower the loan amount or just call it out altogether and say this isn't a good deal, we can't finance it, because the price gets so high when you take a multiple of earnings plus inventory. That really throws off now the multiple you're paying and the debt service coverage ratio that the banks are going to calculate. This is another reason to lean on lenders. They know the right treatment and they know how to make sure to help you not pay for the same thing twice. So, what if I get a broker that says, this is how it is? Let's be honest, there are plenty of old, grouchy business brokers out there that are going to try and pull this over on you and just say, this is how it is. There's no way around it. This is how we always do it. That's where there's a test of flexibility. Ask, is the inventory included in the multiple or on top? If they say it's on top, see if they're willing to adjust the multiple down. If they won't budge, just move on. Honestly, it's not worth it. It's not a good deal unless you really run the numbers and make sure that it falls within the debt service coverage ratio that you need it to be, and you've done the deal analyzing calculator to make sure it's a good deal. So a broker or a seller insisting on a full multiple plus inventory isn't realistic. They're delusional in the marketplace. And most of the time, working with delusional people doesn't end well. So just don't bother. Don't waste your time. Move on. There are plenty of deals where the inventory and the equipment are included at a fair market value. Remember, the goal here is not to get so sucked in to a business that you overpay for it and it becomes a liability down the road because you paid too much debt. So, what can you do to protect yourself? One thing you want to include in the LOI or the APA, and again, I'm happy to help you draft this for you if you get to that point, but include something that says the purchase price includes inventory at normal operating levels, valued at cost, subject to verification at closing. That one sentence, the general concept of that sentence, makes it crystal clear what your intention are and it protects you from double paying. So, as always, as you guys know, I like to use acronyms and put together a general framework for you so you can remember and verify. So, inventory is the acronym, and that's the framework. So, I in inventory is confirm, is it included or is it separate? Nail it down up front. Don't leave this to figuring it out down the road because it can drastically change whether it's a good deal or not. N in inventory is normal levels, not excess levels, not bare bones stocks. You want to make sure that you're buying a business and it's clear in your purchase agreement that included in the purchase price is normal levels of inventory. Not too much, not too little, just right in the middle. In the acronym inventory, V is next. Verify with counts and invoices. So sometimes, depending on the business, you can just go in prior to closing and verify the inventory and do a general count. Other businesses, you have to hire a third party to come in and make sure that they count the inventory and the value of that. That's commonly in retail heavy businesses, convenience stores sometimes will have that depending on the business, and you can always reach out to me and help you through that if you're not sure if that's appropriate or something you can do on your own. Next in inventory acronym is E. Exclude dead or obsolete stock. Make sure you don't get stuck with a bunch of stock that's been there for years, that's obsolete, that's not going to move, and have that be part of the deal, or have them try and charge you for dead, obsolete stock. N is next in the inventory for negotiate the terms in the LOI. Do not leave this to figuring it out later once you get to the APA. You want it to be negotiated up front. It's a deal killer. Literally, it's a pivot point in the transaction. And so you want to make sure that this is done up front. In our inventory acronym, T is next, which is tie adjustments to the closing amount. In other words, identify how much is normal levels of inventory and tie it into the purchase agreement so you know what the expectation is for having normal levels of inventory. Maybe that's $30,000. Maybe that's $300,000. Depends on the business. Whatever it is, you want to identify what a normal level is and tie it to the closing so that you can ensure that if there is less than normal level of inventory, you get a discount on the purchase price. Sometimes what we do is we give it a buffer, one way or the other, 10% less, 10% above. It's just, we'll go with it, depending on the business. It doesn't work on all businesses. It's close enough. It's a variable. It's not going to ever be perfect. It's not going to always be exactly on the normalized level. Inventory fluctuates. But if it's above or below that 10% buffer zone, then we have a purchase price adjustment. If it's lower than that, fine, no problem. Adjust the purchase price to offset how much short you are. If it's above that, I have no problem in that case if the owner has just got a new inventory shipment in and it's good, solid, sellable inventory, and it just happens to be the timing of when closing is versus inventory being delivered, you can increase the purchase price to offset the cost of the inventory above and beyond that little buffer zone. So that's important to know. So following our inventory acronym, O is next. Only pay for cost, not retail. That goes without saying. Unfortunately, I've seen it where sometimes a seller tries to get a retail. That's just silly. Don't fall for that. Pay for the cost only if you're going to pay anything for the inventory. R, remember, banks expect it to be included. So just walk into that basic pretense that the inventory should almost always be included in the transaction. And finally, in our acronym inventory, we end with Y, which is your move. In other words, walk away if the terms are unfair. Don't get so emotionally tied up that you get into a bad deal. So just walk away. Use that inventory framework every single time you're looking at a business. So, in closing, let's just recap because there's some really important things here. A multiple of earnings plus inventory is paying for something twice. Almost without exception, don't do it. And it's got to be a unique business where there's a really good reason to justify that. If the multiple is fair, inventory should be included. If inventory is separate, then the multiple needs to drop. So maybe you're paying 3 times SDE with inventory included. Maybe you're paying for 1.5 times SDE plus inventory. Run the math, run the numbers, and see which one is a better deal for you, and generally, if it's somewhat close. Just remember, banks side with buyers here. They expect inventory to be included in the transaction, so don't waste time with brokers who won't budge on this or sellers who won't budge on it. That's the time to just walk away. So, before we wrap this up, I invite you to join my free school community. Inside, you'll get access to 30 hours of video training that walks you step by step through the buying, searching, LOI, closing, financing stage, everything in between. You'll get the scripts, the checklists, the deal reviews from other buyers, so you're not going through this alone. It's free and it will save you from the rookie mistakes like overpaying for inventory. Go and join today, and that's the first step to being a smart buyer. Thanks. Take care.